Welcome to M Talk, brought to you by the M Scale, where we talk all things menstruation. We interview the best and brightest, working across multiple fields, all with the same mission: to make the lives of people who menstruate a little bit easier. Welcome. We are so happy to have you here. I am your host, Annabelle. I am the founder of the M Scale, which is a menstrual justice movement working with technology and content and businesses to improve access to period products and reduce period anxiety. And I'm also a former film and television executive, so I really am excited to bring you these incredible stories and incredible interviews of people who are just doing amazing work to help all of us who menstruate. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to our inaugural episode of M Talk, brought to you by the M Scale. Kicking off this brand new series is Emily Fox, representing Period Inc. in the United States. If you haven't come across Period before, they're a US charity founded in 2015, tackling period poverty through advocacy. They have a unique setup within college campuses, mobilizing university students to form chapters and work within their communities to push for policy changes, get products to those who need them the most, and educate their peers. And they've made a huge impact. Actually, their recent Red Day campaign brought in over 1 million donated products, so they're doing incredible work. But today, we're here to talk about their recently released annual report entitled State of the Period for 2025, which is basically a look into how young people across America are experiencing and managing menstruation. So please welcome Emily.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. It is always a privilege and an honor to talk to more and more people about menstruation, and we are really excited to dig into our 2025 State of the Period study. This is something we actually release biannually, so this is really exciting. The last time that we had fresh data like this was 2023, so excited to talk more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll get to that in a bit, but the data will show a lot has happened in 2 years. So
yeah. Yes.
I think I've summarized a bit about Period, the organization, but I wanted to give you an opportunity. Is there anything you'd like to add about the work that Period do that I didn't? It's a very little introduction I did. So is there anything you'd like to include?
It was great. It was so awesome. Obviously, it's always great to hear about it and the work that we've done. But thank you for the introduction. I've been with the organization for 4 years now, and I'm our strategic communications manager. And one of the really cool things that I find really unique and important about this organization is that they are youth powered. And what that really means is when we were started, 2 high school students in the United States saw an unmet need in their community. They saw people going without period products, and they were taking public transportation in the city of Portland, Oregon. And so it really started with a bunch of high school kids saying, we want to help. We want to get period products to people who need them. This isn't something that's talked about. This isn't even something we knew was going on. It quickly grew, and a lot of young people just were activated in high schools and colleges and universities across the United States and around the world to raise awareness about the reality that is period poverty. And period poverty is this inability to access or afford period products, as well as menstrual health education due to financial constraints or other socioeconomic concerns. And we just celebrated our 10th year last year, which is really exciting. But, everything thank you. Everything you said really sums it up. I think we believe in a holistic approach to solving period poverty in our lifetime. And what we mean by that is we aren't just interested in period product distribution because it's really important and that's such a key component of ending this crisis, but we also need advocacy and education. And what we mean by that is we need laws in place that ensure period products are accessible and affordable in public places. This also includes schools. For the United States, it means ending the tampon tax that still exists in 18 states. And then education. We need to make sure that people have an understanding about their bodies, that they know what is going on when they first start their period, as they go through the life cycle of their period. What happens when you start to end your period and you go through menopause. These are things that are really important to us because all of that together is how you change culture, you change policy, and then you're going to end this crisis.
It's really interesting. I want to bring up a personal anecdote just in this moment because I don't think people quite understand how important advocacy is, not just like political pressure and lobbying, but just getting information out there and like the education piece. And I had a moment in my life just this week that kind of helped me summarize it, where I was talking to someone close to me who's gone through menopause. And she had no idea about estrogen cream, and she just thought there was just hormone HRT. And so she went through all of her sort of perimenopause period stage, suffering, not realizing that there was like this solution available. And she recently discovered it, and she was talking to a bunch of her girlfriends, and she was saying, why didn't we know about this? Why didn't we know about this? And I was saying, because if no one's talking about it, then you don't know, and you have no idea how to advocate for yourself at the doctor's office. You have no idea how to identify when something's going wrong, all of that. So I just wanted, because it was so, it's happened just now, I was like, this is why the work that you do is so important, is teenagers need to understand what's going on with their body. They need to understand what's normal, what's not, and they need to be able to advocate for themselves within healthcare as well. So a little side piece, but anyway.
No, it's so important, and it's true, right? Everything you're saying is, if you're not able to talk about your menstruation when it first happens to you, why would we assume or expect that you would be talking about menstruation through the rest of your life, right? Like, we didn't even talk about pregnancy, but what happens and the changes that you go through when your body changes over the course of your lifetime. And again, it all starts, which is why we're youth powered. It all starts with that first period. You know, more and more students are starting their periods earlier in life. And so many of them will start their period and not even know what it is, not even know what's happening to them. So absolutely, the personal advocacy and education is so important, and it starts really young.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I can't imagine. I was raised in a female family, so I was fortunate that I knew what was happening when it happened, but I can't imagine how terrifying it would be if you didn't know. So getting into this report, I wanna highlight that you had some in the report. For people who haven't had a chance to read it, I actually encourage you to read it, and we'll link it in the episode notes for this, because it is really digestible. It's very easy to understand, and there was some fantastic comparisons that you used to sort of paint the picture of where the state of periods are. And the first one I want to address is 42% of teens report having easier access to free Wi-Fi than to free period products. So obviously, how important is it to have free products? What impact does that have for these teenagers? That would probably be my first question to you.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think this, even as we were initially talking, it's something that you don't assume or originally anticipate that this would be considered underneath someone's basic health needs. This is often something shrouded in secrecy. There's a lot of stigma attached to the discussion of it. Because of that, when we have health needs conversations, basic necessities conversations, we think about things like food, shelter, water, soap. We don't include period products in that because there's such a stigma associated with it. I love that you talked about this statistic about Wi-Fi. We really wanted to, more than ever, I think in the 2025 study, bring up something that helps individuals that don't have a period relate and understand this issue better. Because I think we can all agree there's nothing worse than you have to get something done, you go to a coffee shop or wherever you are, and there's no Wi-Fi, or the Wi-Fi is broken. And that just like frustration you feel, and that way that it really interrupts and disrupts your life. And we wanted to help people understand that's what happens. That's what happens when either you can't access or afford period products. If that's something that is a concern for you on your day-to-day basis, or it's like, I had enough tampons to get through this month, I don't know what next month will look like. That's the kind of comparison that we wanted to draw. And so it is so, shocking to us when we first put that question out into the field in the summer. We had no idea what the result would be, but to find that, nearly half of students are saying, yeah, I do. I can go pretty much anywhere and ensure that I'll have free Wi-Fi for my phone, but I don't know that I'll have period products. I think it's really helpful. It helps people, even like you talked about, understand this issue in a real way if they've never thought about it, or if they don't have a period, so they don't have to think about it, right?
Yeah, I think there's definitely that sort of awakening moment that a lot of people who don't menstruate, actually, when I've been talking to certain people in business for like our business, and I tend to come up against men, and and they go, but what is the need of this? I don't understand. Like, what is period anxiety? I don't understand. And I say, Do you have someone who menstruates in your life? Like, do you have someone that you can go and talk to just tonight when you go home?
Yeah,
Or a sister you can call up or anyone? And they go, yeah. And I say, okay, can you just ask them, hey, how is it managing your menstruation when you're outside the home or like out and about? How
right.
do you feel about that? Like, is there an added pressure? Do you have to think about more? Just ask these basic questions. And I guarantee that that person is going to say yes, and your eyes will be
Yeah,
opened.
right.
So yeah, it's really important to have these sort of anecdotes to help people sort of realize that this is really important and it impacts daily life more or
Yeah.
less. So I wanted to say the unfortunate thing in this report is that although you've reported that the access to period products has increased since 2023, you found that the stigma around menstruation has increased, which is obviously heartbreaking for everyone who's been working in this field,
Mhm.
trying really hard to remove that stigma. And I thought this was a good way to demonstrate that, but perhaps period inequality or period equity isn't just about products, because you're saying like,
Mm.
if products are increasing, you would hope that stigma is decreasing, but considering it's not, I think that really demonstrates that when we talk about period equity and inequality and menstrual justice, if you will, it's not just about products. So what are some other ways teenagers are impacted by period
Mm.
inequality?
That's a great question. And I think that, I appreciate you talking about this because, yes, period product access in public schools and in public places in the United States has increased, which is really encouraging and exciting for us at Period. It's so much of the work that we do. We're interested in ensuring laws are passed that support students with access to these products. But to your point, when there's stigma, it transforms everything because it keeps people feeling like they can't talk about this issue. If the individuals that experience the issue can't talk about it, can't feel safe about it, aren't learning about it in their classrooms, or feel that they can have conversations at home or with trusted adults in their lives, it then just continues to perpetuate this problem, right? So when we think about what you're calling period inequality, this idea that you're basically having a limited access or a barrier to access for opportunities. So if you're a student and again, let's say your school for some reason doesn't have free period products for you in the bathroom, and stigma is so bad and there's such a shame associated with your menstruation, you're not even sure if you could talk to your school nurse about what's happening or if you need a product. Then what happens if, start your period and you're in the middle of a test, or, in the United States, we have these standardized exams that are hours at a time and they're so important to academic success and moving you on to the next grade. But what happens when it's not a bodily function you can control? You have your period, you're sitting in class, and you need something to manage it. Just as important as the access to that product is the ability to be able to talk about your body, to be able to like feel safe and comfortable and know that I know where there's a place for me to get period products. And ideally, that first step is yes, maybe you would have a period product, a trusted friend does, or a school nurse. But ultimately, shouldn't you go to the toilet or, go to the bathroom the same way that you do? And, I want to say that about most of the time in the United States, at least, when you go into a public restroom, you anticipate and expect there to be toilet paper available to you to use.
Mm.
Shouldn't we think the same way about period products, right? Just because it only impacts half of the population doesn't mean it doesn't impact half of the population. I hope that answers your question, that this idea of period inequality, it's kind of like a cascading effect where, yes, it's about access to products, but when you can't have conversations about your body, you may not know what's happening to you when your period comes, or you feel like you can't make informed choices about your body, or there are serious health risks if you wear a
Mm.
product in a wrong way, or you wear it for too long because no one ever taught you how long you're supposed to keep a tampon in. That's when we have more of these issues, that it's not just a dignity concern, it's a health concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to address this a bit later on, but I'll bring it up now. What really alarmed me was the statistic that I think it was 45% of teens admit to wearing period products longer than recommended due to not having accessible products. Because I think that it's important to say that, because also it could be because I got distracted or I was playing football and it went too long. But this is actually because they're like, I don't have something to change this. So
Yeah.
I just have to pray this tampon or this pad is going to hold. And that is a serious health risk. I mean, we know about toxic shock syndrome, which thankfully has reduced massively, but it is not healthy to keep these sort of products in our body for longer than the recommended time. So yeah, you're saying like this is real health concerns. These are, and 45%, that's a huge number of teens who responded to this. It's really, really horrific. It's time for Women's Health News. Here we're going to bring you some of the latest developments around the world that maybe you missed in the everyday newspapers. Stay tuned. Today in positive health news, new brain scans show that menstruation may subtly reshape the brain's structure, not just the reproductive system. A recent study tracked 30 women throughout their menstrual cycles and found that both white matter microstructure and cortical thickness fluctuate in sync with hormone levels. For example, just before ovulation, when estrogen and luteinizing hormones surge, white matter changes, suggesting faster communication between brain regions. Meanwhile, fluctuating levels of follicle-stimulating hormone and progesterone were linked to variations in grey matter thickness. Scientists say that this is the first evidence of structural brain-wide shifts tied to the menstrual cycle, not just in the parts of the brain we traditionally associate with hormones. It's still unclear whether these changes influence cognition, mood, or disease risk, but researchers stress the importance of accounting for these hormonal brain dynamics when studying brain health over a lifetime. And out of Silicon Valley, big tech faces consequences in a landmark privacy case involving women's health data. According to Reuters, Google and the period tracking app Flow Health have agreed to pay $56 million US dollars to settle a class action lawsuit alleging they improperly collected and used data from millions of Flow users, including details about menstrual cycles and pregnancies. Under the settlement, Google will contribute $48 million while Flow Health pays $8 million. Another analytics firm, Flurry, had earlier settled separately. The lawsuit covers data harvested between November 2016 and February 2019, during which plaintiffs say sensitive health information was shared despite assurances of privacy. The court still needs to approve the settlement. Meanwhile, Meta, Facebook's parent company, refused to settle and was found liable by a jury in August. It's expected to appeal.
Reality Winner is coming on the show at a later date to talk all about her experience with period management in the American prison system. But we wanted to take this chance to tell our listeners to go out and read her book, hot off the press. After 2 Hollywood movies and countless documentaries made about her ordeal, this is the first time we're hearing directly from reality. And I think we can all agree that with the seeming fall of democracy as we know it, her experience and voice is incredibly important. We will link where you can buy I Am Not Your Enemy in the comments of this episode, and we look forward to welcoming reality in a later episode.
So we've talked a bit about access to products and the sort of increase in stigma and I mean, if we look at society in general, sometimes I think it can be hard because I live in a bit of a bubble, and I'm sure you do too, of women's health, advocacy, people really stepping in the right direction, and it feels like there's so much going on. I mean, that's the reason we're doing this podcast, is like, we're like, hey, look at all this amazing stuff that is happening. But this sort of menstruation stigma increasing, do you think it's sort of like a symptom of things changing in society overall at the moment?
You know, I think we've talked about it a lot, especially once this new data came out. The period team, this is our favorite thing that we do. We love this data. It informs so much of our work. It supports our programs. It helps us pass policies across the US. And so we asked, ourselves and each other, like, what does this mean for us? We could have some theories. Is it because of increased political tumult? Is it about the way that right now, the way that women's bodies are seen, they're perceived, that they're talked about? How is that having a trickle effect into young women, into young girls and students who are starting their periods for the first time? As the communications manager for this organization, I also see social media playing such a huge role in it. And there's different parts of the study that go into that as well. Like, where are young people turning to for information? And if they can't have a trusted adult, if they feel like comprehensive education, not just about, in the United States, we have just like the sex ed, right? But it's sometimes so broad and there's no standards for what that means. And half the time, boys get to go outside and girls are sitting inside and talking about like holding up a tampon, but you have no practical application for it, and not necessarily always a safe place to ask questions. And so this idea that, where is the barrier for kids at school and or at home? And then how are they turning to maybe untrustworthy and usually sometimes wrong sources on the internet? I think that social media is a great tool. It's taught me so much. I've learned so much, but I've also, as an adult, been able to approach it with, very much like like goggles on. Like I'm aware that there's a lens of understanding that I have to approach the information I'm receiving. But if you're a young person already unable to access or afford products, your period happens to you, let's say you don't live in a place where there's a law that mandates products in your public bathroom at school, you may or may not know what's happening to you. You're going to go to TikTok, you're going to go to social media. And I'm grateful for all of the amazing creators and doctors that are on the platforms talking about it. But who knows what you'll find. And then, from there, I think misinformation just spreads. And then once you have personal stigma and you resort to something that's, I will solve this and figure it out on my own, that's kind of especially what this data shows us, is that even though teens are still having conversations with their peers, they do trust their school nurses, they have an increased personal view about stigma surrounding menstruation. So let's look at and consider external factors like the political climate, like the way that we talk about women and their bodies, but then also what are some internal things inside the home, ways that they're using or, misabusing social media and other online tools. I think that's kind of the next thing that as an organization, but also the menstrual movement as a whole needs to work on and grapple with is, wow, we have been doing this work for years. A lot of people have. I think we're getting in a great place. I do think conversations are happening. I even think about generationally how I feel according to what I know my mom feels. But this is concerning. So let's consider it.
I think on that note, something that really stood out to me in the report was who these teenagers are turning to for information. And there's two things that stood out. I'm going to start with the first one being, and this is heartbreaking for me, but dads were the last person on the list that a young person will turn to when it comes to talking about their period. And to be honest, I can't even judge that because I have a story of when I was 13 or 14, my parents are divorced, and I got my period. I had my period. I'd had it a few times. And where I was at the supermarket with my dad and I needed to buy pads. And so we went around the supermarket and I just kind of slipped them in to the shopping trolley. And then I didn't know my dad was on a really strict budget for that shop. And so we got to the checkout line and he saw the pads and goes, oh gosh, oh no, okay, I'm going to put the chocolate back and I'll put this back. And I was unbelievably mortified. So in saying that, I can't be like, oh, these teenagers should feel comfortable talking about their dad when I wasn't. I am now. My gosh, my 60-something-year-old father hears about periods all the time from me. But
Right.
I thought that maybe dads would have stepped up a bit more in this generation and maybe would have, I didn't know that we were still doing the mum has this talk and dad has that talk and that sort of thing. What do you think is needed in the home to get dads involved? Because I think it's important that men are involved.
And I'll say this, I don't want to fully discredit dads because I feel similarly to you in that I feel encouraged and hopeful about the men that I know in my life that are just incredible advocates that care deeply about women and their health and their bodies. I do want to believe and have trust and hope that it's getting better. This data didn't say that dads were zero. So there are still places for that to turn. I think let's just look at it from like a logistics standpoint. The dad doesn't have the period, the mom does. So it would make sense if you have a mom figure in your life or at home with you, that would be the first person you talk to. I really think, though, when we look at solutions for inside of the home, it just is conversation. And it's conversation that I'm encouraged and I'm seeing, especially as someone who's kind of on the cusp of Gen Z and millennial, of those are conversations that start with the partner. So how are you talking to, let's say you are the one who has a period and your partner doesn't. How are you just normalizing it? I see more and more, even humor can bring such light and reduce the stigma like to the situation. And I think about TikTok trends as an example for this because you see so many goofy things of young women or students either talking to their boyfriend or their partner, and it'll be something ridiculous about their period or, like
my tampon is stuck.
Yeah. And I think like as silly and goofy as those are, and as much as we're like, oh my gosh, like these men don't know this, it's so important because it's actually humor is bringing awareness, and humor that ultimately results in something that results in education is helping. And so I don't want to be discouraged. I think, yes, it is a bummer about the dads. Was I super surprised? No. I think what's the most disheartening is that AI, ChatGPT, was above dads by like 14 points. Same thing with social media influencers, strangers on the internet. And maybe they are trusted people, or maybe you follow their content and you really appreciate what they say. I think that was what was hard. And so in addition to conversations that are starting and happening, normalization of menstruation in the household, I also want to really encourage like human connection. And I think I could say this as someone still in their 20s, but I think, again, this goes back to social media. It's a tool, but it also can quickly isolate us.
Yeah.
And right now, when things feel really concerning in our world, when there's so much division, human connection, collaboration, recognizing you're in community with people, that is the antidote to those fears and problems. And that's kind of my recommendation and my urge to anyone listening to this is ensuring that conversations happen, and that starts with you. So how can you find personal accountability or opportunity to talk to people about it and talk to men in your life about your period? I have a great dad. I have two sisters and a mom, and we had girl dogs. So there was no question what a period was, but we still didn't talk about it in front of my dad. And I think even as I've watched him grow older, his understanding and acceptance and deep care and love for us because we're his daughters has resulted in an increased knowledge and wanting to support us in what we go through. So I want to trust and believe in men. I won't be sitting here being like, of course, this would happen to the dads. But no, I think just dads have an opportunity, right? Like use that as fuel to talk more.
And also for their boys in the household, because it's not just about young girls. Young boys should be educated in menstruation. I think otherwise they're just going to get a hell of a shock when they're with their first partner.
Absolutely.
If they don't know about this, and we were all born from menstruation at the end of the day. Right? So it does affect them. And I think what you're saying is 100%, like having these normalized conversations around male sons or people who don't menstruate sons as well, hopefully helps decrease that stigmatization because it becomes very normalized. I don't know if this is going to make it into the podcast, but on a personal note, I have a 15-month-old baby.
Oh, congrats.
And I tell you what, once you go through pregnancy and childbirth and postpartum, like that this is a shared experience.
Right.
Now.
Right.
There's no hiding that sort of thing anymore. Dads want to be involved in the pregnancy and the childbirth and being there. So it's like, well, this is all part of it. In fact, actually today he sent me a screenshot of his to-doist, and he goes, oh, I've just had this notification come up. And it was a year ago he put it in, and after my last gynecology appointment, and it was that I'm due for a pap smear. He was like,
oh, good man.
I was like, yeah, this is shared responsibility. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think even what you're saying though about you went through this experience, and sorry for going off a tangent, but I think it's important to bring up that, I talked about my older dad, right, who's lived with women his whole life, helped my mom with childbirth, postpartum, the whole thing, and still has such a ooh, I don't want to talk about your period. And that's why I think as an organization, what we feel so strongly about is that when we do education and when we talk about education for young people, we mean all young people. I had an opportunity a couple months ago to speak to third graders, and that's in the United States, that's like 10 and 11-year-olds. And it was everyone, boys and girls were in the classroom. And it was such an enlightening and hopeful experience for me because there were giggles, but there was questions, just so many questions. And a lot of them were from the boys. And a lot of them were from these really, cute 10-year-old boys being like, oh, I think my mom doesn't have her period anymore because she tells me all the time and she's grumpy. So like this 10-year-old boy able to know like my mom's going through menopause. That was encouraging to me. And that's why we start young, anytime there's a period talk in a classroom setting or a conversation, like bring everyone in, because even if you don't experience what you're learning, this is true for anything, right? If you don't experience what you're learning about, all it does is it increases empathy. It increases your ability to understand other people that have different life experiences than you do. So it's so vital and important to be in those conversations. And I encourage us to bring that to our kids, whether they're, going to have a period or not. Yeah, I just think that's such an important point that you brought up. And I'm so exciting to hear about your husband being a champion of you and your health. It's great.
Yes, he is. Yeah. Well, I wanted to also say that, the amount of youth ambassadors that have come through period. I mean, I don't know if you have that figure. I didn't ask for it in advance, and it's really cruel to do like in the middle of a podcast. Do you know how many people have come through? But it must be thousands at this point. Thousands of advocates who've gone through in the past sort of 10 years as period has grown. They're all going to, not all of them, but a lot of them will become parents one day. And that's really exciting. Like, you must be excited as an organization to see that sort of wave happen in another 10, 15 years as these people who have all been really inspired to advocate for periods become parents and bring those conversations through the home too.
I think it is. I mean, it is definitely, I don't have the exact number. It's in the thousands. And what's really cool is knowing that, yes, they're going to be parents someday, but even watching them, I've only been here a few years, but even watching them now become leaders in women's health and in advocacy and in public policy, they're just absolutely killing it. So many of them have gone through med school and are now OB-GYNs. Like, it's that sort of thing that is encouraging and inspiring, to your point, that what we're doing has a legacy and an impact, and our young people are going into the world and being, we like to say all the time, like, the chapter leaders sitting in period today are the reproductive and women's health leaders that are happening like in the future. So we feel so encouraged by that. And to your point, like, it's so about what you have and what's developed in you as a young person that you carry with you.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. It's going to be a wave. It's going to be a wave. I hope that there's a way to measure this impact at some point, because that's the hardest thing about advocacy, right? Is, well, going back to the report, you are managing to measure and get some data. And you briefly touched upon talking to AI about your period. The only reason I bring this up is we've already recorded our next episode, which is with Dr. Laura Shipp, who is sort of a cybersecurity academic working on period apps. And if you've been on a period app for a while, you're quite aware that there is like data sensitivity issues and your data being sold to the highest bidder, essentially. Yep. And when I sort of read that teenagers are turning to AI, I kind of just went into a panic mode, because there is no data sensitivity. There is like no stops for open AI. There is nothing protecting that information. Do you think teenagers are aware of that at all? Has that come up in conversations, or?
We all have things that keep us up at night. And I think AI is kind of mine. And for a lot of reasons, to your exact point, I don't know. And it ultimately goes back to, we live in free societies. We don't control people and the information that they receive or input. And that's a good, important thing. But especially with AI, what is truth at this point, right? And I think it's so interesting, and part of the reason why we wanted to, this is the first study, we've done 3 of these in the past. This is the first year we asked about AI, which just even goes to show it wasn't on our brains in 2023.
Yeah.
We weren't thinking we would have to ask about this, but how quickly this has really infiltrated our just day-to-day existence and what that means for young people. And I don't know if I have the most hopeful answer. I want to believe that I just bring it back to human connection, because I think that's what ultimately is kind of the key here, because there is no human connection to that. You may get the right or wrong answer from AI about your body, but you don't have any sense of fulfillment or connection or feeling like shared experience, because you're talking to, a white screen about your period. So in that sense, and I think one of the things that I still try to find encouragement and hope from is that, yes, AI is being turned to, same thing as social media is being turned to, but at the end of the day, I'm glad that the study showed human connection is still prioritized. So yes, it is usually moms or school nurses, but those conversations are still happening. And I think that that's kind of what I think about and I cling to, and again, just ultimately want to encourage and inspire people to keep having conversations. As for AI and what will happen, and if I think teenagers are aware that they are probably not getting the most accurate information, I would hope and no, but we don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing we kind of have to, that will be the next frontier, I guess, of not just menstrual justice, but
Yeah,
every
everything.
social justice issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was actually speaking of that though. I had a question here where I thought when I was reading your report,
Mm.
so like what we do at the M Scale, I wish I could say we make money. We do not, but we're passionate anyway. And we
Yeah.
have this app, and we're trying to build, advocate, and share information, and we're trying to get period products into loos in the UK because it's like non-existent. I think America is a lot more advanced than us in the UK,
Mm.
and having access to product other than Scotland, obviously, who made it law.
I was going to say Scotland is the
Yeah.
first. It's so interesting too, because to your point, like Scotland just absolutely, when we talk about countries that we're like, and if you know about Scotland, so it's interesting to hear you say that. But I understand that that's not the entirety of what's happening in the UK, right?
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's
continue.
definitely a struggle, and it's definitely like enterprises who are doing there's a lot of push from different sort of NGOs and enterprises that are trying to convince
Mm.
people to put period products in their loo. And when I was going through this, I also have a lot of network of people who are working in this business. So I sort of social enterprises. I mean, like there's so much debate over this terminology, but let's just call a spade a spade. It's a social enterprise. It's designed to make money but also help society at the same time, right? And I kept seeing in this report that there's a lot of gaps to fill. Like there's coaches. So for example, you said that coaches
Mm.
and sport after school sort of activities and sports coaches are really not a source of information. And I know someone in the UK who's trying to work on sort of a training for football coaches for girls to like understand menstruation and understand how to get the most out of their athletes as well, and the cycle and everything. So when you're looking at these gaps, I mean, I know from Period you have your youth ambassadors and you've got your structure, but like, who do you think can fill those gaps? Is it just NGOs and charities? Is it parents? Is it dads? Is it what is
Yeah.
it going to take to fill those gaps?
Without sounding really ambitious, because I don't think it's ambitious, I just think it's living in a healthy society. It's a whole of society approach. So again, this is why we don't just throw period products at the problem that we see, because again, that doesn't solve this. This doesn't end it. It's kind of like, when you think about food insecurity, people have periods every month. That's just going to keep happening. So NGOs, charities shouldn't be the end result or the go-to for people in need that have a lack of access to these products and a lack of access to education. So yes, that means home. That conversations need to happen there. That means school. And it's exciting to see improvement, at least in the US, in some school conversations. But this is the first year we did look at after school. We wanted to identify what happens after the bell rings here. Are you still able to participate in any of your extracurriculars because of your period or not? And my mom would feel comfortable with me sharing this, but my mom stopped doing sports because she didn't have access to period products. Like she was experiencing period poverty as a teen, and it changed the outcome of, if we could be honest, like her life, because she didn't continue in sports. She wanted to, but she didn't have anything, and her periods were so heavy, there was no way for her to be on her track team. So yes, it means sports and other extracurriculars. And something we're really excited about in our educational curriculum is we created recently this past year, something called Athletes and Periods, to really be a support for coaches, for drama teachers, whoever it may be, to talk about periods and what that looks like, and how do you support athletes that you have on your teams going through menstruation. When in their cycle are they going to be at highest performance? What are they going to need in order to manage their period? How can you understand that for individuals that experience a period, it's not a 24-hour hormonal cycle, it's 28 days. That
Yeah.
completely changes the way that you train and interact with students, which is so interesting, but also really important. I just had such a great conversation about this yesterday. So I'm always encouraged and inspired by the after school conversation. But more than having coaches and after school folks talking about this and ensuring confidence in menstruation while you're participating in it, this is where our policy arm comes in, because we can't achieve anything if we don't have laws in place that just treat this like the basic need it is. And that's something that in the United States, each of our states kind of have their own, we have like a gradient for states are doing a really great job in ensuring access to period products and making sure that students don't have to miss out on life because of their period. States that have mandated really comprehensive menstrual health education. Some states are not there. And, without a federal whole of government approach and solution, we're kind of just tackling state by state. And, with chapters all over the nation caring about this, we kind of are facing like 50 different battlefronts, right? 50 different types of conversations, 50 different ways to talk about this, because some states are in a place where this isn't something that's talked about. What do you mean? And there's so many other considerations. There's like school lunches for kids really in need. So I'm getting off the point here, but to answer your question, it's everyone stepping up, and it can't just be conversations. It can't just keep falling on school teachers or nurses or parents. That's where we also need laws to really support, because that's a healthy society,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's being considered a vital sign of health, right? Menstruation is actually, it turns out, really important. And
right.
Yeah.
Shocker.
And they're like, oh, maybe, a regular sort of healthy bleed or cycle is actually a vital sign of health. And if anything's going wrong there, we really have to look at a holistic approach. So it is incredibly important. We haven't touched upon how different groups are experiencing stigma and inequality and are more impacted, because the data really reflected that there are different echelons of society that are more affected than others. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'll say this, and it's true for all the data, right? This is what we're seeing in the United States. So it's one of those things that I believe is happening in other places, and we can only speak to exactly what our data is telling us. But something that's always been really important for us is understanding, especially with the populations that we serve, where are racial disparities going on? We can understand and recognize some socioeconomic disparities that exist, and that comes in when we talk about the reality of, wearing period products longer than recommended, or the ability to access or afford products. But yeah, what we're finding is unfortunate. It is in line with what we've seen the last 4 years, is that Black teens and Latinx teens are more impacted by inability to afford period products. We found that 45% of Black students said that their families found it more challenging, and they felt like their spending habits were really burdened by the ability to also have to buy period products. And I think one of the statistics, I had this comparison and I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think it was like 10 or 12% more of Hispanic teens wear period products longer than recommended comparative. So this is something that, I think this is what you're asking about when you're asking about inequalities, is it's really important for us to recognize and understand, because just as we consider and think about states and personal state advocacy, where's the work left? We also have to recognize that communities have different needs. And unfortunately, in the United States, there is such a history of racial inequality, and obviously still very present concerns about racial inequality. And so how does, when you think about period product access, same way that you would think about just general poverty in the US, how does that trickle down? And then what that means is that we can inform policy off of this data, but we can also support and encourage in a different way school districts that are in a place where they need extra support because of maybe the makeup of their district and the schools.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the important part and why the data is so important. I'm excited in the coming months, we will be releasing a new curriculum, particularly about racial disparities in menstrual health. So it's going to really dive into this. And we're doing this in partnership with a great organization called Endo Black. And they are a really cool US-based org working primarily in endometriosis. And they're led by Black women, which I think is just really important, because representation is just as important as, the reality of what's happening. And so solving this, we want to ensure that the people at the table and the voices solving it are the people that are experiencing it.
Yeah, as we've kind of gone through these podcasts, it's like a common theme. And every person I talk to, and it's like, so every topic that we talk about menstruation, and it's not just about inequality, we're talking about lots of different aspects of life and menstruation, but it's always that menstrual inequality is heightened by every other type of inequality, no matter what. Like, it is so integral to life that if you're experiencing some sort of other form of, whether it be racial or ability, then menstrual inequality is worse for you, essentially. And so it wasn't surprising to see that data in the report. Yeah.
So true.
So with that though, we're coming to an end, and I really want to end on a positive note because there is a lot of positivity in this report. And it's, what was the statistic that teens that you spoke to wanted more? 82% of teens thought that period equity deserved more advocacy and awareness. So these teenagers, this Gen Alpha, I think it will be now, they believe in period advocacy and equality, and they actually want to see things change. So thank goodness.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you when you saw that? What do you think that means?
I think the best part of my job and our work is the young people. And I feel like I've said that now several times, but it's true in that is the hope. And when faced with everything else going on, it is the next generation that doesn't even bat an eye about menstruation. That's so encouraging and hopeful to see that, we kind of break up this study into talking about the reality for accessibility and affordability, discussing stigma. And then we talk about what do young people want? And it's always an overwhelming, we want to have more period conversations at school. We want people to talk about periods the way that they are, which is a normal bodily health function. We want periods and period education to be a part of our core curriculum that we're learning in school, just like math is. So that's the best part. And that is the most encouraging and hopeful component, is that when we talk about this, when we go to legislators and we're like, this is why you need to pass this law. It's because your young people want it. This is the future of our country, of our world. They're not intimidated. They're not freaked out. And I give a lot of credit to parents. And then I also give a lot of credit to social media for the humor component. They're just not freaked out by it. It's just your period. It's funny. And yeah, of course, it's going to be met with a little bit of, but there's just such an openness and such an ability to be like, oh, yeah, that happens. And it happens once a month. And that is so encouraging and it's so hopeful. And I think that is what, again, I want to leave with people, is that we have to invest in our young people. We have to invest in youth because they are our future, but also because, you've heard the saying probably of the way you think about things like a child or whatever, but there is something to that, the optimism and the relentless, just willingness to make something happen. And I see that in Gen Z, but also in Gen Alpha. They just kind of cut through the nonsense and they're like, yeah, it is what it is. Sometimes it can feel frustrating. You're like, oh, you don't know what you don't know. But more than anything, I want it to bring joy. And when we're faced with trials right now and things that feel divided, our organization continues to talk to our youth leaders about finding joy in the work. Building a joyful and positive movement is really going to ensure that they don't burn out, ensure that not only does this work feel exciting to them and important to them, but that goes into all areas of their life. So many of our young students, they don't just care about periods, they care about the climate, they care about racial disparities, they care about ensuring that people have access to the things that they need. That's a very long list, right? That's food insecurity.
Yes.
That's talking about any and everything that is a social injustice we're seeing. They care about that. That's encouraging. And yeah, the reason we ask those final questions is always kind of just not to stick it to the man, but almost just hey, we presented all the really unfortunate data that you're not probably talking about or thinking about because you don't have a period because you're a male legislator. But the reality is, your young constituents, they want this. They care about this. They feel like periods are just normal.
And they will be voters soon. And they
Oh, exactly. Yep. If they're not already, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also they will be coming onto college campuses, some of them, and hopefully getting involved with period and and doing the work.
That is the goal. Yeah.
I think we'll end on that note because it's a wonderful note. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on and talking us through. It's really helpful. I think that we get a lot of information about what's happening in the States, being outside of the States, but it's really nice to come and talk to people who are in the reads, really doing the work. And to hear about this sort of positivity coming through in the younger generations, even in the face of such adversity at the moment.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And keep up the good work. My goodness. Oh, I did want to ask, I'll put some links in the episode notes, but I know that you're starting to expand a bit globally. So how can people get involved in this? How can people get involved in Period?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost is educating yourself and others. We have a whole page dedicated to period poverty, so I'll give you the link to add in there. But that's kind of, I think even period poverty, just saying it, people are like, what? What are you talking about? And for both of us that, work in this health space and work in menstruation, it feels like our world. And I'm constantly reminded how we just have so much still work to do and so much breakthrough to happen. So step one, talking about it, learning more about what it is. Globally, 800 million people are on their period at any given moment, and 500 million of those people don't have the resources they need to manage their period. That's crazy. That's a huge number.
Horrendous.
So wherever you're living, people are experiencing poverty. And if they're experiencing period poverty, chances are they're experiencing period poverty. Which just means that the period is another thing that's exacerbating what they're going through. So that's step one. And I think, especially if you're a young leader listening to this, there's such an opportunity to get involved. Chapters are around the world. We have so many cool, amazing chapters. So if that's something you're interested in, look more at our chapters. And then we also have great educational curriculum. And that's open source. It's free to anyone. And it is created in the States, but we really did design it to hopefully support and encourage as many people as possible.
No, I've actually accessed quite a lot of your resources.
Amazing.
They are fantastic. They're really well. You've partnered with some incredible people as well on those resources. So we'll link all of this in the episode notes.
And thank you for what you're doing. No, it's so important to talk about, because we just talked about AI and social media, but having an app, this has been a dream of ours for a long time. How do we get everybody on the same page to where are safe period bathrooms? Where are public places that you can go and get period products? Is such an important thing. So really grateful to you and your work, and excited to see how we just can continue to support people and even grow it in the UK and expand it, but bring it to the States too.
Yeah, absolutely. It is available to download in the States. So if anyone wants to start canvassing the area,
that's
absolutely,
great to know.
Go for it.
That's awesome. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, amazing.
Wow, what a fantastic movement, and what a wonderful way to kick off our Period podcast. I hope you understand a little bit more about period poverty and why advocacy is so important to everyone. If you enjoyed this episode or you want to know more, you can find the notes, links, and helpful information on our website, themscale.com. Also, as mentioned, our app is available to download in the US, so if you feel like doing a bit of activism, you could start by reviewing the toilets and bathrooms in your local area and letting others know. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so please don't be shy. You can send us an email at admin@themscale.com, or just even find us on social media. And finally, we really appreciate you tuning in on our very first episode. On the next episode, we are going to be talking to Dr. Laura Shipp all about your data, safety, and period tracking apps. So until then, ciao.